Okay, so this is the Books and Music Review Show. It's called the Books and Music Review Show. I hope my mic is on and it's not muted. And finally we started. Yeah, so you saw the disclaimer. There you go. And right now I'm going to put something else on the screen. That I can do from here. And I'll let you know, I'm not going to put it on the screen, but I'll let you know we're produced through the facilities of Staten Island Community Television. And I'm going to tell you about a few of the books that we're going to do. And first thing I'm going to do is I will change this screen. So welcome. If you want to email us, you can email us at books.musicreview@gmail.com. And we're going to start with a couple of books. One is called The Uninvited Guest. And now I'll talk a little bit louder since I walked away from the mic. But I'm going to put this here. So one of the books is called The Uninvited Guest by Nina Jaffe. And I am going to read 2 pages from that book because it's a really good book. Another book we're going to do is we're finally going to get to the book called Flow. We're going to give you one of the best camping hints that we can give you. And what else are we going to do? There's a book that I started reading quite a while ago, and it's Prevention Magazine. The cover says detox your life, but there are different topics. There's 12 easy power foods, simple natural cures, the secret cause of chronic pain. So we'll review that, Prevention Magazine. I believe that's by Rodale. And there's probably a few other things, but we'll get to that. We wanted to tell you about a good nonprofit organization called Good Stuff. And you have to drive a little bit to get to it. It's out in... where is it located? It's somewhere in Pennsylvania. It's actually in Doylestown and Fairless Hills and Buckingham. And that's called Good Stuff. You can look it up online. Go to the Good Stuff, thrift.org and find that. Okay, so now for that book we have on the screen there, The Uninvited Guest. It's a different book with different stories. There are, I guess, like personal stories, like little short tales. And then there's little historic stories. So I'm going to read you something. The first thing I'm going to read you is about Passover. The Passover Seder is a festive meal that commemorates what was perhaps the most powerful event in the shaping of the Jewish people, the Exodus from Egypt. Passover, or Pesach, I don't know how to pronounce that, as it is called in Hebrew, comes in the spring. And on the 5th of Nisan, the first month of the Jewish year, usually in April. It is also known as the Festival of Freedom and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And this I'm reading to you from The Uninvited Guest. It's a child's book. And I'm going to read just 2 pages of that to give you an idea what the book's about. It is told that God performed many miracles to convince Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, to let the Israelites go. In their flight, God parted the waters of the Red Sea so that Moses and his people could cross safely to dry land and a free way of life. In the Haggadah, the presence of symbolic foods such as the matzah, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs is explained, such as the matzah and bitter bread. Did I just say that? Is explained. Songs are sung and children are given a prominent role in the service. In Arab lands such as Morocco, it was a custom for members of the Jewish community to go from house to house reenacting the events of the story. At the end of every Seder, the door is opened to the legendary figure of the prophet Elijah, messenger of hope and peace, who is welcomed as an honored guest and even offered his own cup of wine. Hospitality and sharing with others are important themes of the celebration of Passover. And apologies if I mispronounce words. I'm not really great at reading everything. So ahead of time, my apologies. Shabbat. Shabbat meaning Sabbath, is not a holiday that happens once a year. It's a holy day that occurs every week. Shabbat is so central to the Jewish tradition that hundreds of songs and poems have been written about it, and it has its own special store of legends and tales. In the Torah, keeping Shabbat is one of the 10 Commandments. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall work, but the 7th day is Sabbath unto the Lord. And just to comment on that, yeah, everybody should take a rest once in a while. Anybody who doesn't celebrate the Sabbath, take a rest. Take one day a week. On the Sabbath, it was ordained that men, women, and children, and even animals were to rest, just as God rested on the seventh day after the work of creation. Shabbat begins on Friday evening at sunset. In many Jewish homes, family members gather together to say blessings over the wine and the challah before sitting down together to enjoy their meal and the following day of rest and prayer. One image found in many of the songs and stories about Shabbat is that of the Sabbath as a queen. A famous Hebrew Lakaya Dodi, anybody know how to say that? Write to me, let me know. Written in the 16th century, is still recited on Friday evenings in the synagogue. The poem says, "Come, my friend, let us greet the bride. Let us welcome the Sabbath queen into our home." In the story after story, Jewish tales around the world reflect a belief in most magical powers of Shabbat to bring forth the blessings of peace, good fortune, and well-being. Okay, and now for a drink of water. I need that. And I think we'd like to see the email up on the screen. So people want to write to us and recommend a book that they want us to read from, or recommend a book they'd like reviewed. We can put books.musicreview@gmail.com. And I think I'll leave that on for a while. I want to get to the book called Flow, because Flow is one of my favorite books. It's actually a huge, huge magazine, but it's the price of a book. But it's still a great thing to read. I have the cover of it. I'll show you in one moment. That's Flow. The book we're going to talk about now is Flow. That's one of the recent covers, Flow. So I'll take this down. And I'll put something else up on the screen. So I put up a flower. Yes, that's a flower from Flow. Excuse me. So what is the book Flow? Well, on the first page, on the cover, for this particular issue, for this particular month, it says Flow, celebrating creativity, imperfection, and life's little pleasures. Flow is a magazine that takes its time. I kind of like that, you know? Flow down. Slow down. Take your time. On the cover, it says, happiness is not found in the things you possess, but in what you have the courage to release. How's that? And it gives you a hint on the cover of a few things that are inside. Why we long for real experiences, enjoying art slowly, the day I quit complaining, Women of the World coloring book, and offline for 7 days booklet. And there's lots more. I forget how many pages the Flow is. But I'll read you something from this. I turn to page 81 of Flow, and it says, forgiveness takes time. A while ago, someone at work tried to make me look bad. We were in a meeting, and he suddenly said I hadn't done much work in the previous weeks. He even produced a spreadsheet that he had made to prove it. I was taken aback, and only slowly I was able to realize what was going on. It was a hostile attack meant to damage me. I shut down, and I could barely stop myself from bursting into tears, but these strong feelings of anger faded away over the following few days. I'm reading from Forgiveness Takes Time in Flow magazine. It's an article by Mariska Jansen. So, I started seeing what I think caused his attack. He felt threatened and was scared I wanted to take his job and responsibilities. And if I'm honest, I can understand how it may have looked that way to him without ever talking to him about it. I thought about it, and at the end of the process, I had forgiven him. Forgiveness means you no longer bear a grudge against someone for their reprehensible behavior. By forgiving, you can get along with each other again without being burdened by negativity. Over the years, I've often forgiven others, just as others have forgiven me for things I've said or done. Healthy relationships with family and friends and colleagues and neighbors all depend on the power of forgiveness. Daily life is, after all, full of moments in which we hurt others by accident or on purpose. I have to disagree with that. That's what it says here. Who does that on purpose? If you don't want to sever relationships, the only way to go is to mutual forgiveness. And it goes on and talks about what the Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu said in his book called The Book of Forgiving. And then the article goes further to talk about the topic of let it go. Another great believer in forgiveness was the young Jewish woman, Etty Hillesum, who died in Auschwitz in 1943. Her diary is a testimony for her compassion for her oppressors. On July 3rd, 1942, she wrote, "There are no frontiers between suffering people, and we must pray for them all." She sees her enemies as humans, victims of circumstance and frailty. Let it go. When I look at my own position, I still have some way to go on the path of forgiveness. I actually have great trouble forgiving. Letting go is not my forte. For me, the hardest part is being confronted with my own shortcomings. It's hard for me to accept that I, too, have done or said careless things. So it goes on, and then it ends with connecting with warm feelings. And then there's a little cartoon, and it says we need to learn to forgive our own negative characteristics before we can be able to forgive others. Now I'll have to make a comment on that. It says in the Bible, yes, that we should forgive. And how many times? 70 times 70, right? 7 times. Look it up. I don't know where it says it, but, we've all heard it on movies. We've heard it on TV shows, and we've heard it in books. We got to forgive. But nobody talks about the sociopath or the psychopath or about the person who, once you forgive them, keeps on doing it and keeps on doing it and does it again and again. You've all heard the stories. So, in a case like that, where you have someone who's pretty bad, who has not really said they're sorry, who has not apologized, and just keeps on offending and offending and offending, what do? Do you keep forgiving 70 times 70? Or 7 times 70? What was it? So what do? Yes, you forgive. But also in this case, the forgiveness is for yourself. You forgive, and you yourself can heal from the damage that those persons did to you or that person did to you. You forgive, and it's for you, and it's for God. And you forgive the person. But most important, which a lot of people don't say and a lot of topics and magazine articles don't talk about, what is most important is that we do have to realize that sometimes you can forgive somebody, but they intentionally over and over and over hurt and offend. So what do? Forgiveness does not mean that you have to be close to the person you forgive. Right. Forgiveness doesn't even mean that you have to talk with the person that you've forgiven. So make the forgiveness in your heart if the person is a danger to you. And that's probably best. Eventually, maybe one day they'll say they're sorry, and maybe they might change their life, and maybe they might decide to stop hurting people. But for the time being, if you live near somebody like that, or if you have somebody in your friends or family circle like that who keeps on offending and offending and offending, Forgive them in the heart and stay the heck away from them. So that wasn't from the book. That was just my comment on forgiveness. Memories live longer than things. James Wallman said that, and that's on a very artistic page of Flow. What's next? Oh, this is really cool. It's a picture of interesting things that people could buy for gifts. And one thing that I saw that I haven't seen anywhere else was a blanket with a map on it. Yeah, like the whole blanket is the worlds and the ocean and the maps. That's in Flow magazine. No, we're not selling it. They're not selling it. These are just ideas that are in Flow. Okay, so what else is in Flow? I have to show you the books that are in Flow. They're extra books. Did I bring it with me? Let me see. Yes. Okay, so Flow, in almost every episode, has a book inside the book, so you get 1 or 2 or 3 books for the price of 1. This week's Flow, or this month's Flow, had a book about artists, and it has this book also. It's called Flow Offline for 7 Days Booklet. I guess they're trying to get people to go offline. That's cool. Go offline and watch Channel 34 on Saturdays at 12:30. So you can see more episodes of books.musicreview@gmail.com. I think I'll put my glasses back on so I can read this, and maybe put the email back on also, because I'd like that to be on the screen. One thing at a time. Imagine the things that you might do without your smartphone, like staring out of the train window as you commute, for example. I don't know about that. People watching while you stand in line for the checkout, collapsing on the couch at the end of the day, and watching the twilight take over your room, wondering what a friend is doing or how a friend is doing without checking Facebook to find out. Seeing what the weather's like by simply looking at the clouds and the sky. Oh wow, that's something new, right? Flipping through magazines you would normally never read when you're sitting in a waiting room. If you constantly reach for your smartphone throughout the day, these kinds of moments will gradually disappear. So we had a thought. What if we spent 1 week tracking when and how often we use our phones? It would probably give us a good sense of our actual smartphone behavior. So we also thought about a couple of questions to ask ourselves each day about how we could use our smartphones. None of this is to say that we should never use our phones again. Come on, let's be realistic. But perhaps we can curb our instinct to reach for them every chance we can. What matters, we think, is that we should be aware of how often we're online. We would like being online in a conscious choice, rather than let it become a habit. Smartphones encourage us to multitask, which research increasingly shows is quite bad for your mind. It's better to do one thing at a time, rather than trying to check the news while you're stirring soup in a pan. Or how about when you're helping out on a show? Are you checking your smartphone always? Or are you fully conscious of where you are and what your job is at the moment? That's not in the book. That's just something I added. So the work offline for a 7 days booklet. The next page goes to what you could do instead, and there are some ideas. Play music, finish reading an article in one sitting without any interruptions, daydream, play a board game. Day 1 of your project of going offline. Out of sight, out of mind. The expression goes for your smartphone too. When you don't see it or hear it, you will be less inclined to use it. Jamie, you listening to this? Cool. What you could do instead: go for a walk, pet the cat, take your time preparing a meal, take an art book off the shelf and leaf through it. And then it goes on to see day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and what do you think you're doing by day 6 and day 7? So what's on? You're going to read the rest if you get a flow. What you could do instead: reread old comic books, the good kind, right? The classics. Archie. Hang the washing up to dry instead of throwing it in the clothes dryer. That is like so cool. You know what? My dryer broke down a while back and I just started hanging the clothes, and you know what? I like it a lot better. It doesn't wear the clothes as much. It's just nicer. Look up a delicious recipe in a cookbook. Call someone instead of messaging them. Okay, so day 7. If we can't escape technology, we can certainly enforce its limits and our own. We can defer to the noise of YouTube and Cablevision TV. Excuse me, turn on channel 34 Saturdays at 12:30. Some cable TV is pretty cool, especially community access. Or we can seek moments of quiet attention and reflection. We can accept the stress of 24-hour availability, or we can reclaim our own rhythms. And that was an Australian philosopher, Damon Young, in the book called Distraction, A Philosopher's Guide to Being Free. And of course, on the back, there's room for your notes. When you read a good book, you don't escape from life. You plunge deeper into it, Julian Barnes says, English author. That's interesting. Maybe we could put the flowers up to show that we're produced, and stay there. The show still has a lot more to go. And now, I guess since we're talking about books and music, I'm going to mention 2 things. I got to get to the camping. You can take that off the screen now. 2 things I want to mention. Can you take that off the screen? Okay. So one thing, I'm going to give you the best camping hint for the best tent that there is. So good that it's probably discontinued now. But it's so good. It's the best tent at a reasonable price. I don't mean, those tents that cost hundreds. We're still on. Hey, stay tuned. We're still here. Okay, so what about the music? Lorenzo LaRocque, and I'm going to put this up here just because. I'm going to read you a little bit about Lorenzo LaRocque. Violin, his fire glows. She asks him for revelation. Play for me tonight, she lures. Faithful to her request, she listens to the sound of him disarmoring for this chance to know him. And it goes on and on. This is by Sally Magdy. The juncture of 1,000 songs and this 1 hour, late in the night. And this is the back of the CD paper, inside the CD, of Lorenzo LaRocque. His CD is called Live in New York City, Lorenzo LaRocque Masterpiece. I'm going to put it on the screen. Okay, so why do I recommend Lorenzo LaRocque? Way back when, I don't know if it was 2006 or 2007, I invited Lorenzo to come to the studio, and he came with he has a very unique violin. I think it is made out of lucite. It's one of the few rare lucite violins. And his playing on the violin is totally magnificent. And if you've heard his CD, Live in New York, awesome. So he came to the studio, and he talked a little bit about music, and he talked a little bit about how, I don't know what he's doing right now, he's teaching kids music. And he brought his little girl, his little princess, to the studio also. And we had a pretty good discussion. We did a show, this was over in BCAT many, many years ago. I think it was 2005 or 2006. And I was amazed at the music. Just beautiful, beautiful music. And the violin, like, undescribable. So yes, I would recommend Lorenzo LaRocque. Am I saying it right? Yes, Lorenzo LaRocque. I don't know if he's on YouTube. I guess you'd have to do a search to find out if he's there. But anyway, thank you to Lorenzo. That was a very good show. I think we have that on one of the YouTube videos. And now, one moment. And now I'm going to read you some good things. Oh, the tenting thing. I only got 4 minutes left. The best tent. Okay, let me pull that down. It's called Tetragon 9. And it is a really good tent because it has a 6-foot-high ceiling. It only weighs about 11 pounds, but guess what? It looks the size of a family tent. And it looks as if at least 3 or 4 people can be in there. And the best part is, one person can put it up without help. I know I put it together without help on a windy day, It took less than 10 minutes, so it's Tentragon 9. That's the tent I recommend. Yes, it's a Eureka tent. And that's some of my old photography from a special exhibit taken many, many, many years ago. The shadow photography from a special exhibit. I'm going to, I want to read some good things. This is from a book. Sometimes I don't keep the books around, and I'll just take a few things out of the book. Things that are things we might want to remember, like life is just a chair full of bowlies. A bowl full of cherries. That reminds me of my uncle. He used to talk backwards. Let me see. Important to have faith. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah, be nice. Go out there and commit random acts of kindness. And always remember, there's nothing worth more than this day. Nothing. Because today is your day. And there's nothing worth more than this day. And it's truly said, it doesn't take much strength to do things. It requires great strength to decide what to do. That's from Chao Ching. To thine own self be true. Out of the darkness, we have light. No one knows the limit of a joy that a heart can hold. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. And too much of a good thing is wonderful. Gardening is an instrument of grace, and it's a good exercise. May Sarton said that gardening is an instrument of grace. And we're always the same age inside. We shouldn't teach great books. We should teach the love of reading. To be awake is to be alive. Little drops of water and little grains of sand make the mighty ocean and the pleasant land. Julia A. Fletcher Carney. And I guess if I want you to remember one thing or two things, I want you to remember, thank you. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you a lot. And remember that God will strengthen you. Philippians 4:13. All you got to do is ask. Ask for God's will. And ask for his strength. And he will strengthen you. All prayers make things, change things for the better. It might not seem like it right away, but eventually. So we are produced through the facilities of the Staten Island Community Television, and we'll put the flowers up just to let everybody know where we filmed this particular episode of books.musicreview@gmail.com. So, no, not that. We wanted the flowers. Love, free as air, as sight of human ties, spreads his light wings, in a moment flies. Alexander Pope. So, we have 19 seconds, and I want to read you some things from Remember to Sing in the Lifeboats. How many legs does a dog have if you call a tail a leg? 4. Calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. Abraham Lincoln said that. Thank you for watching.